Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us today. Today I have a special treat, croissants. And I made them by Julia Child's recipe after I tried another recipe. And you know, you just can't beat Julia Child. Here are the ingredients. You can pause and write them down. And hey, while you're paused, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And you'll get a notice when I post new videos about twice a week. Here's just a word. This video is a little different than my normal ones because I had a student, and part of what you hear will be my instruction to her. Now let's get cooking. So this is, this is instant yeast, and I keep it in the freezer. But if you buy the little packs of yeast, those are usually active dry yeast, and you don't have to proof instant yeast, but you can, and it's not a bad idea to. Proofing means you're testing it.
Like you did in the video.
Like you're testing it to make sure that it's active, that it's working. And mine's getting a little age on it, but even though it's instant yeast, I'm going to try it. I'm going to proof it. And this water is just warm to the touch. That's about 105 degrees. Your body temperature is 98.6. If it feels a little bit warm to you, it's probably about 105. The little packages that you buy have 2 1/4 teaspoons. Now, a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So I'm going to put a scant, meaning not quite full, tablespoon of yeast in this warm water. And then I need to give it something to feed on. So I'm going to put just about a half a teaspoonful of sugar. Just enough to feed it a little bit. Now Julia Child puts a little touch of salt in hers. I'm not going to put any salt in it because it doesn't need it, and salt kind of inhibits yeast growth. And I was actually surprised to see that she put salt in it. I'm just going to give this a little stir and set it to the side. And in about 5 minutes or so, it should start to bubble. Okay, so there's that.
And this is to make the dough?
Yes. So now I have to move back to narration because there's music playing in the background and YouTube will give me a copyright strike if you hear it. So we're going to narrate now. I'm measuring the flour, and this takes 2 cups of flour. And you know, you fill your cup loosely and then you level it off with something flat. We're going to measure 2 cups. This is all-purpose flour. Now I'm following Julia Child's recipe, and she uses a mixture of all-purpose and pastry flour, pastry or cake flour, which has a lower protein content. So there is a way to make pastry flour from all-purpose, and I don't want to make this fully pastry flour. I just want to lower the protein content a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take out a tablespoonful of the flour, and then I'm going to add back in a tablespoonful of cornstarch. If you wanted pastry flour, you would do, I don't remember, I think it's 2 tablespoons per cup. But I have cornstarch here, and I'm just going to add that in. Sorry, I didn't open this ahead of time. So let me get this cover off, and then I'll measure in a tablespoonful. Take out a tablespoonful of flour. And, you know, truth be told, that much flour is not going to make any difference. We'll need more flour than that into it. But just to show you, in order to take down the protein content of this all-purpose flour, we substitute just a little bit of it with cornstarch. And that's going to give us just a little bit different rise. And previous recipes I've used did not do that, and Julia did, so I'm going to do what she did. So now I'm just going to mix all that together. I could sift it together, but this will work just as well. Mix it up good, and then I'm going to make a well in the middle to add the rest of the ingredients. So now we're going to add a tablespoonful of sugar. And you know, if you really wanted to, you could use an artificial sweetener here like Splenda. The yeast doesn't have to have sugar, but it's not much. It's just 1 tablespoon, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. Then 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm using kosher salt. I always use kosher salt. And then 2 tablespoons of a neutral oil. And that would be, I'm using grapeseed oil. You could use vegetable oil. I wouldn't use olive oil. It's not considered a neutral oil. It has more flavor. So 2 tablespoons. If you're using all-purpose flour alone and you didn't lower the protein content, Julia says to use 4 tablespoons full of oil. And I think you could probably substitute 2 tablespoons full of softened butter if you want to. But I'm mixing this by hand. Now this is a 1/2 cup of tepid milk, and that was 30 seconds in the microwave, and you can touch it just like with the water. It's just warmer than my body temperature, and that's what you want to go with. Then we're going to add our proofed yeast here. So, you know, if you decide to use instant yeast and not proof it, be sure you add back in that 1/4 cup of water and that little bit of sugar, just so that your measurements are right. And that's it. We're going to just mix this up with a spoon. It mixes really easily. We don't have to get our mixer dirty. And then I'm going to do something which I almost never do. I'm going to knead this by hand. And I'm doing that because I just think everybody ought to see Julia Child's method of kneading. It's so much easier on your hands. And it's very interesting. So I'll be back to knead this up. Okay, it's all mixed together. I've got my glass cutting board here, which is what I'm going to use to knead this bread on. I put a little pile of flour over there to the side so I can sort of control how much of it gets incorporated in. And I'm just going to put this very shaggy, funny looking dough out here. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's very shaggy and loose. And you don't have to overmix this. You just want to just mix it long enough to get all the ingredients wet all the way through. And then flour my hands a little bit because it's really very sticky. And the way we know we're done kneading is when it's not sticky anymore. That's our purpose in kneading right now. That and developing the gluten. So get it up in a ball and grab a hold of it. And we're just going to beat this thing all to heck. Just slap it down there. And pull it back together and pull it out and slap it. And it's really funny to watch Julia Child do this. And it's really a much easier way of kneading. See, it's still sticky. We're going to get us a little more flour and slap it again. And you know, you might have to do this for 5 minutes or so, but one of the things about doing it this way is it works very quickly and it's not hard on your hands. I have a little bit of arthritis and kneading is a little bit hard. See, it's still just a little bit sticky, so I'm going to beat it up some more. And I'm not going to show you all of this, but I'll do this until it's no longer sticky, doesn't stick to my hands, doesn't stick to the cutting board. And I'll be back when I've whipped this wild dough into shape. Okay, so I cut away for about 2 minutes. It's still a little sticky there, but we're getting there. I'm just going to scrape any of the residue of dough off. You see it's getting better. It's not so sticky. I'm still giving it a good beating. And I guess probably I did this all together for about 5 minutes. You see, as it goes along, you can start to fold it in on itself a little bit more. And we're getting a really good feeling velvety dough. Yep. Got to do it a little bit more. See, it's still a little bit rough there. So I'll be back just in a minute. Okay, and we're about there. You see it's not sticking to my hands. It's not sticking to the cutting board. Goes back and forth pretty easily. So now I'm going to form it into a ball. As I say, that took about 5 minutes. And it was kind of fun, and you'll get your frustration out. So we're forming this into a ball, and then I'm going to put it in my proofing bowl. Be right back. This is my trusty proofing bowl. I keep it just for proofing. I don't use it for anything else. I've rubbed just a tiny little bit of oil in it, not much at all. And I'm going to put it in upside down, get a little oil on the top, flip it over, put my lid on. This needs to rise for an hour and a half or until it's doubled in size. See, I like this bowl because it's not too tight. I can leave those open, and it lets the dough breathe because you know it's going to off gas. It makes carbon dioxide as it's proofing. That's what proofing does, and forms gluten. So we'll put it just at normal room temperature, an hour and a half. I'll be back. So while our dough is rising, and actually it's almost done rising, I've taken a cold stick of butter out of the fridge. And you know, if you had fun beating up the dough, you're going to really like this part. I have this is a meat mallet. You can use your rolling pin. You can use anything that you want to. You could use a hammer if it's clean. And I'm going to beat this butter while it's cold, because the whole purpose of doing it this way is because you want your butter cold. And you know, I thought you could heat your butter a little bit, shape it, and then refrigerate it. I was wrong. That doesn't work. It changes the consistency. You want to actually beat this butter out, get out all the lumps, and put it in the shape you want while it's cold. One of the things about Julia Child's recipe that I like is she's really simplified this. And it amazed me how simple this process right here was, because other people I've seen made little packets and measured it out and folded it precisely, and they beat the butter within plastic or within parchment paper. No, Julia just beats up the butter and sort of loosely forms it into a square, and a sort of a square, not even really a square, just sort of enough to make it fit inside the dough. So I'm going to beat on this and form it into a sort of a square, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I beat it up and folded it back into a square. I'm going to beat it out kind of flat, and we want to get it fairly even thickness. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be precise. I have learned that with Julia nothing is precise, but I've got it very close to a square there. Let me trim it off a little bit. And this may be my OCD and not hers, and it doesn't matter a whole lot the exact dimensions. So there we go. All I'm doing now is just kind of trying to get it to a uniform thickness, and then it'll be ready. I'll be back. So it's been almost exactly an hour and a half. And my dough is ready. My kitchen is at about 70 degrees. And see, we've got a pretty dough there. It feels good. I'm going to knock it down a little bit and turn it out. And then I'll start the process of forming the croissants. And I'm going to give you a heads up. I already mentioned there's not a whole lot of precision in Julia's recipe. Before I started this batch, I tried another batch, and they just didn't work. I mean, they tasted great, but they just didn't look like croissants. In most of the recipes you see, and I have read probably 20 recipes and watched a dozen different bakers make croissants, and they make it seem so hard. Everything has to be measured. It has to be precise, and this many inches this way and this many inches that way. Julia doesn't do any of that. I'm rolling this dough out into sort of a circle, and it doesn't have to be an exact circle, and it doesn't have to be an exact size. It just has to be big enough to totally enclose this butter that we have flattened out. And you just want to put it kind of in the middle. I'm going to get it off without messing up my sort of semi-imperfect circle there, but I do want to kind of keep it the same, a uniform thickness. And then we're just going to fold it over. And don't pull your dough. Just gently fold it over. And just fold it over in any manner that fully encloses the butter. And when you get that done, we're going to pinch it together. At this point, it doesn't have to be neat. It just has to be enclosed. So do all the pinching you need, because we don't want the butter squirting out. And I actually made a mistake here. At this point, Julia refrigerated this for about an hour. I forgot to do that. And as it turned out, it didn't matter. My butter is cold. My dough is fine and firm. And I'm going to go ahead and start the process. So you start by beating it out. And I'm beating it to make that butter thin out and spread out all throughout the dough. If you just start rolling it, you can't be sure that it spreads all the way out. And you can see the impression of the butter. And then I'm going to roll it out into a rectangle shape, not any particular size. I end up with about 18 inches long. And I know it's about 18 inches long because my board is 20 inches wide here. So I know that. And I'm going to square it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to do a trifold. And this is called a turn. We're going to do 4 turns totally. We just finished 1 turn. And I'm going to go ahead and do the second turn right away without refrigeration. If yours is cold, if you see the butter oozing, refrigerate it again, 20 minutes, 30. But I'm going to go ahead and start the second turn. And I only am rolling in one direction for now. And I want to get it back out to about 18 inches again. As I say, it doesn't have to be precise. But you do want to square this as you go. And you'll do as much with your hands as you do with your rolling pin. And the more I work with this, the more uniform the size is going to be. Because I'm pushing, pushing, pushing. And then I'll roll and I'll roll some more. And when I get it out to about 18 inches, and as I say, it doesn't have to be precise, but you do want to spread it out because we're spreading the butter every time we do this. And you figure we started with 2 layers of dough and a layer of butter. Now we have 3 layers of butter, and when I finish with this fold, which is the second turn, I'll have 9 layers of butter. And I'm going to put this together, kind of close off the ends, package it up, and then I'm going to wrap it up in some plastic wrap and chill it for a full 2 hours before we give it the final 2 turns. I'll be back. So here we go. It's been refrigerated. It's nice and chilled. But you know, it's still a nice, easy dough. It still feels really nice, even though it's cold. So I'm just going to put a little flour out here. And you know, I'm being careful not to use too much flour. And the reason for that is you don't want the layers to just lay on top of each other. You want them to meld together, and if you put too much flour, then they're too separate. So put this down, and you want to put the folded side to your right each time, so that you're folding to sort of keep control of the way you're folding. And I'm going to beat it down again because you know that butter is cold. I want it to be broken up so it'll move uniformly through. Whoops, got a little bubble there. That's okay, just poke it down. And I'm doing the same process again. This is the third turn. I want to take it out to about 18 inches. Nothing has to be exact, but you do want to be close. I'm going to square this up as I go. See, there we go. Move it back into its shape. And then we're going to do another trifold. Brush off any excess flour. Another trifold. We'll pat it down and kind of seal it. Keep our shape. And you know, I know I'm showing you more than I normally do in a video. But because I think that this is the more important part of actually turning these into croissants. You see, I'm shaping that back out, trying to keep it in its rectangular shape. I'm going to beat it a little bit more. And you know, at this point, I have to tell you, I've done this with all-purpose flour, and I've done it with that little bit of change where I lowered the protein content just a little bit. It really makes a difference in how your dough reacts. Just that little bit of cornstarch, it makes it less obstinate, I guess is the word. You know, when you're rolling dough and it rests, it contracts. It gets really kind of rubbery and pulls itself short again. That little bit of cornstarch lowering the protein content really makes that happen a lot less. Your dough is a little more responsive to you, and it behaves a little better. This is our fourth and final turn, and you can see that even with all of that pulling and stretching and moving it around, what we've got is pretty close to a rectangle here. I want to spread it out just a little bit the other direction. Smooth it up. Pull it where you need to, push it where you need to. And we're going to do our last fold, or our fourth turn. And many people say 3 turns is enough for a homemade croissant. It's just as easy to do 4, so I'm going to do 4. And then I'm going to seal this up, wrap it up again, back in the same plastic wrap. And I'm going to refrigerate it for another 2 hours. And I really wouldn't skimp on that. Both of these refrigeration times, give it a full 2 hours. You want to keep that butter under control. Let it keep its body. Wrap it up. Back in the fridge. I'll be back. Okay, we're coming up on the end here. This is after 2 hours resting. I know this is longer than my videos usually are, but I really wanted to show you the little details here. And croissants do take a while. This takes about 7 hours altogether from beginning to end. And that's a short time as far as croissants go. So I'm going to roll this out. Once again, I'm going to press it down with my rolling pin. And I'm going to roll this out just a little. I'm going to get it to, I don't know, about 8 inches because I want to cut it in half. So I'm going to cut it in 4 to 5 inch pieces. I'm shaping as I go. This recipe makes 12 croissants. And I'm going to make 6 now and 6 later. So I'm going to measure a little bit here. Just want to get it to a place where I can make a fairly even cut. I don't want to do a lot of cutting and weighing because I don't want to mess up my butter layers. So I'm just trying to get this out to 8 inches so that I can make a 4-inch cut to make 2 even sections. And even if you're going to make all 12 at the same time, you still want to cut it in half and refrigerate one half while you work on the other. It's important to keep that butter cold while we work. And I'm going to put this other half back in the fridge while I make the first 6 croissants. Be right back. Now I wish you could see all the layers in there, and I know that you can't because my camera equipment's not all that great. But there are lots of layers in there, and they're very, very thin. Now we are going to do some measuring because what we want here is 3 approximately 5 by 5 squares. In each one of those squares I will cut into 2 triangles, and then we'll roll. And no, they probably all won't be exactly the same, but they'll be very close to the same, and they'll be close enough. I find that's true with a lot of Julia Child recipes. It'll be close enough. So I'm going to measure. I have my little pastry scraper is 6 inches, and it has a measurement on it. So what I'm going to do is shape it up enough that I can get a fairly good measure. And I'm going to go for 15 inches so that I can make 3 approximate 5 by 5 cuts. So that's 12, 13, 14. Need to roll it just a little bit more. I want to get about another inch in it. Sort of preserve my rectangle here as I go. I think this is going to be about it. Let me measure one more time. And we've got it. So I'm going to measure off 5-inch sections approximately, and then just cut them. And I'll move 2 over, and I'll start working on 1. And I'll spread it out, make sure I've got it fairly even, and then cut right across. And you'll notice right away this is not the perfect shape. We're going to shape it as we go. One of the things I learned from Julia is this dough is very flexible. And I'm going to spread out the longest end a good bit. Now, most people, when they make a croissant, they cut a little notch. Julia does not. She thins out the end by pulling it. You start rolling at the large end, and you roll toward the outside. There's the little tip. You want that tip to be down. I have a lightly oiled cookie sheet here. You can use a piece of parchment if you want to. Either way works just fine. And pulling it out, thinning that side out. You can cut a notch if you want to. She doesn't, and so I'm not going to. And just roll it. Make sure you start out kind of tightly. And you can pull that end out a little bit. You want to make sure you get at least 3 full rolls. I'll finish these and show you what I got. So you just want to arrange these so they've got plenty of room to rise. You want that little point to be on the bottom on all of them. And we're going to let these rise for about an hour uncovered. I'll be back. This is after an hour. We're going to give them an egg wash. Now, you know, if you want them really brown all over, you can give them an egg wash twice. Once before they rise and once after. I'm just doing it once this time, but lots of folks do it twice. So I'm just going to get the egg wash on the whole thing. This is 1 egg and a tablespoonful of water, beaten until it's kind of frothy. And now my oven is preheated to 475. And they're only going to cook about 12 minutes. But that hot oven, I've seen lots of different oven directions. Please, 475. Cook them in a hot oven. If you're doing 2 trays, you want to switch them at 6 minutes back and forth, top to bottom, right to left. I'm only doing 6. And this is what I have after 12 minutes. And they look so good to me. I tell you, they look so good to me. I've tried a couple times, and these are the best ones I've made. I need to take them out of this pan, and they're stuck a little bit because the egg wash came down and stuck a little bit. But you want to take them out of the pan right away, put them on a rack to cool. And as hard as it seems, I know it's going to be hard, but you may not eat them until they cool just a little bit. They don't have to cool an hour. Probably 10 minutes is enough. But you're going to be glad you waited. And that's my not perfect one. Julia says if you have one that's not perfect, just put it at the bottom of the basket. Nobody will ever know. There you go. I'm going to come back in about 10 minutes. And I'm going to chow down right here at the stove. And you know, I've given you lots of advice over the years if you've been watching my channel. Look at that. Here's the best advice I'm ever going to give you. If you're ever having trouble making something yummy, if you want to know the easiest, best way to do it, go back and find Julia Child's recipe, because I don't think there's anything about cooking she didn't know and couldn't teach us. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I really hope you make these. They are so good. See you again tomorrow.